Hey, how's everyone doing?
I'm swell. Thanks for asking.
Good, good. So we're recording this if this is okay with everyone. Everybody good? Wonderful. Because we're gonna put it on our YouTube and send it out to a bunch of people who said they couldn't make it today. Um, awesome. Thank you for being here, first and foremost. My name is Abi Mohr, but I guess it's Harmonic Youth Orchestra, whichever side it's on. And I am running the festival with Ivan is also one of our hosts, and Anna Johnson, who James, you probably know. She's the president and founder of the organization, and another student, Rachel Fox, who is going into her first year at UCLA. So this is our one of our last events. We have a performance tonight at 6 p.m. if you want to come, 9 p.m. for Ben and me. So yeah, maybe let's just get into it. Let's go around and talk about like our stories, where we came from, your musical journey, and where you think you're headed. Ivan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I play the cello, and I started in 8th grade, but I was playing trombone from 6th grade all the way to 12th grade, and from there, I basically stuck with the cello just because I liked it a lot more, and then I went into college, not as a music major at first, and then I just ended up switching because I felt like that was the right path for me. And I kind of, everything's up in the air now, especially after COVID, like everything's happened in the music world and just other interests coming about. But I do know for sure that music's always going to be a part of my life. And I definitely want to do teaching at some point and also maybe playing in a string quartet professionally. So, yeah.
Awesome. Ben, do you want to go next?
Yes. So, hello, I'm Ben. I use he, him pronouns. How did I get into this mess? So, probably like most people, I started off in the 5th grade band program at my high school. I did play a string instrument before. I'm not going to say which, that's up to your imagination. But, uh, so I started on the clarinet, and the reason I chose it was because no one else was playing it. So that made, and I'm a self-proclaimed narcissist, so I want a little bit of the attention for being one of the only people who played the instrument. Little did I know I would fall in love with it. So then in middle school, I started playing bass clarinet and alto clarinet, and then I started attending New England Music Camp, I think going into my freshman year in high school. And that's when I realized that like I wanted to do music as a career, but I didn't know if I wanted to do education or performance. So then the next summer I did like a class at NEMC titled Musical Theater Pit Orchestra, and that was my first time ever doing anything pit orchestra related, and I fell in love. So this when I came home, I talked to my clarinet teacher and I was like, I want to do this as a career. And he says, you need to learn flute, clarinet, oboe, and saxophone. And I was like, oh God. But you know what? I was up for the challenge. I always wanted to play multiple instruments anyways. So I started adding on my doubles, and now I'm at NYU studying multiple woodwind performance and music education, a 5-year dual degree program. So at the end of the 5th year, I graduate with a master's in music ed and bachelor's in music performance. And I'm just living my musical fantasy.
Awesome. I'm so jealous. I love playing in pit orchestras. I've only done it in high school because I'm going into my second year at NYU and no orchestras were open basically, so I hope to be a part of it soon. James, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. It's really great meeting all you guys, by the way. So yeah, I started on trombone as well. Let's go. Uh, Trombones, where are you at? Let's go. So I started 5th grade, kept on going. In 8th grade, I got the chance to do some pit orchestras in some of the high school shows, which were awesome, amazing. That's really what kept me going. And that helped me pick like, oh, I want to go to a high school where I can do music and learn as much, STEM science stuff as I wanted, because that's what I really was into. And then I kept the same philosophy going into college. When I picked my school, I was like, I want something to do outside of reading books all day and doing math problems. And so I picked a school, UCLA, with a big marching band, and it's been great. I had 250 of my closest friends all the time. And when you're in a big, you guys know, like, NYU or in New York City as a whole, it helps to have your family around, And so, yeah, that kept me going. As much as commitment as that was really not as much as I expected. So I found other ways to be involved in music, do like, a little bit of choir, a little bit of the symphonic band, the jazz groups, and any time that I wanted to, there was an opportunity there. And now I graduated, so I don't know where my musical journey is going to take me. But I got my trombone still. Got to turn it back in the nice one. I got to keep my old one, and I guess I'll join some community bands like I did a long time ago and keep it going.
Awesome. And Sophia, do you want to go last? Well, you don't have a choice. You have to go last. Go ahead.
I don't mind at all. I liked hearing all of your stories. It's good to meet you briefly. My name is Sophia. You can call me Sophia or Soph or Stradivarius because that's my Instagram handle. Lots of people call me Strad. I started playing violin when I was 6. My mom is a violinist as well as my grandmother on my dad's side. And I was homeschooled. And so my mom decided that as part of our curriculum, myself and my younger brother would have to play an instrument. And it sounds like, oh, she made me start. But I really was excited, and I got to pick what I wanted to play. And I have regretted choosing the violin several times, but it's really not that bad. It's just very common. And like you were saying, Ben, I was like, well, so many people play this. I kind of want to be something different now, but I'm stuck with the violin and I'm enjoying it now. So that's just great. And I didn't really get serious about practicing I play the violin, but sort of for fun until I was 15. My freshman year of high school, I joined the Conejo Valley Youth Orchestras, and Anna Johnson was my stand partner. And I joined orchestra not even knowing what a bassoon was. Like, I'd never heard that before. I didn't know what that instrument was. And then I got to orchestra, and they put me as principal second violin, and I was like, what? I had no idea what I was doing, but that year was one of exponential growth for me, and I was like, I love orchestra. I love making music together. I love that I can be like a different religion, and I can be a different, like, my brain is oriented differently, and I'm going after a different major. But no matter what my differences are with all these people, I step onto that stage and we're all one unit and we have one goal, which is to bring that story of the music to the audience. And I was like, I want to do that with my life. Like, I want to show people this power that music has to bridge all the gaps and just create this amazing sense of unity. And so after freshman year and my other 4 years in CVYO, then I was like, you know what? I want to do this for a job. And so I'm now majoring in music education. I have a tiny little private studio of 4 students, and hopefully growing. And I taught at, I just forgot the name of the school. Oh, Oak Park in the LA area in the middle school and high school string department this past year. That was so much fun. And I'm not sure where I want to transfer to after Ventura College, which is where I'm currently at. It's just a 2-year program. Then I'll transfer to a 4-year, but wherever I end up, it will be quite the adventure. I know that much.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing. It's awesome that we all have different paths. Like, we have Ben, who's, pursuing performance, but also music education, and Sophia, you too, and Ivan, still considering, but, we're all from different places too. And I think I was glad I could bring you all together because it's very special for me to have you all here. I went through when deciding where I wanted to go to college. Like, am I really going to do music? Am I really going to be like, oh yeah, music performance is what I want to do? Because I'm like, well, like NYU's like $65,000 a year. I'm like, oh, like, am I really going to, like, what am I going to do with an arts degree? But ultimately, all of us included that really seriously into our decision for where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do. So I know you talked about what got you into music, but what ultimately made you make the decision to either major or stay involved in music in college? Whoever wants to go first.
I think I can go first since I kind of briefly mentioned it in my intro, but so New England Music Camp for me was what made me want to go into music. The specific part of music was doing pit orchestra for the first time. The first show I ever played was Little Women, which is not a common musical, but it was a very fun one to have your start on. And as I kept playing shows, I was like, this is the correct path for me. This is what I want to do. I enjoy it. Even though people are like, do you really want to play the same thing over and over? I'm like, yeah, I have fun every time. Like, and so if you can, I think if you can play it every time and you still get a smile and a kick out of it, that's when you know you're going down the right path.
For me, it was more so, I guess my experience is kind of different because I didn't go into school as a music major. I did like consider that when I was picking what school I would end up going to. Um, but I started as a film major at UCSB, film and media studies. And then I spent like a quarter and a half just really doing that. But I was involved in like the cello studio on campus as well as orchestra. And like as like the school year went by, I was like, I can't see myself doing film and media for the rest of my life. Like I enjoy video editing and everything that like surrounds that, but I could see myself more so doing music. And that was something that like I've never really been like tired of or like gotten sick of. Like a lot of things can like be repetitive, but I feel like with music, it's kind of different every single time you play with someone new, or like if you like even if you play the same piece, it's never the same twice. So I feel like just having that like idea of like never one thing never being the same is really what influenced that, and just because music's been a really big part of my life for as long as I can remember.
You know, I totally agree with that too. Like music for me, I love interacting with people. That's like the biggest thing for me, especially I was in CBYO with Sophia. Maybe we weren't at the same time. I don't remember, but I did it for like the last 3 years of high school. And we practiced once a week. And every time I went, I was just so excited to play Brahms 1 with people and, you know, joke around with the oboist and fool around and get yelled at maybe. But it was just special to get to make music with people, then perform and have my friends and family there. That's really what fueled it for me. Oh, thank you, Sophia. But what was I going to say? Yeah, I guess when COVID happened, we didn't have that anymore. We weren't allowed to go to orchestra. And major orchestras were shut down too, so we couldn't go to performances, and it was just terrible. And even in college, I'm sure you all experienced this too, like maybe you didn't go or you didn't get to perform with people. And I don't know about you guys, but that really took a toll on me and in my relationship with music. Fortunately, we're going to have that back soon. I don't know about you, James, but
no, I totally understand. Sorry, you can finish. I do want to let you know though that as soon as I started to hear music on the streets again, the very first time I saw like 3 old men playing in like a little downtown in Santa Cruz, I just cried. Like I got made fun of. My girlfriend made fun of me for like the whole day after, but it was just so moving. That was something I missed so much, and I'm sure you guys all can relate to that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's really special. I haven't been to a concert yet, so I'm waiting for my crying moment. Um, anyway, I want to ask you, James, a question actually. So I know that you're pursuing a different career. I heard you might be going for a PhD. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm going to a PhD. I'm on UCLA campus right now, so I can't say it too loud. I'm going to USC, but that's my PhD. I'm doing it in biomedical engineering. I'm like by the lab right now. I work pretty much every day, so that's been my connection to people all throughout the pandemic because I work on COVID all day, every day. So I actually get to do things and get to see people, but really having that gap like between like where I want to pursue my career and then like where I want to like enjoy my time throughout the day has been really an interesting dynamic. Like I definitely like both of the things, but I need the balance. Love passionate people around me, always trying to make other people happy around them because I'm in the marching band. I was a drum major for 3 years here, and so I get to hear all of these amazing sounds from all of the beautiful performers, beautiful sounds, and beautiful people, of course. But they all bring so much joy just to get joy back from other people, and that's something I really miss. And hopefully, the things I've learned, and both like structurally, like how to run an organization, and also like how to bring passion out of people and bring it to the work that I do is probably going to help me out a lot in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that like you make that connection. And I know a lot of people who might not pursue music, but it's good that you still value that, even though you didn't pursue it. Kind of speaking of that, how do you or did you include music into your life while pursuing a different major and a different career? Generally speaking, to people who are considering whether or not to major in music or what their passions are.
Oh, do music. You can find it. You'll find the time, trust me. It depends. It really depends on your situation, where you are, what you like to do. I have friends that went through the same situation as Ivan. They just like went through and were working on music, and then boom, they want to be a music major. You have to try it out. And if you know that you aren't going to go down that path like I did, like you're not going to be a music major, you still should try to find the place that you enjoy. And so if I'm speaking to like high schoolers that may be going to college or finding other paths out after high school, I just want you to know that you have to figure out not just where your career is going to be, but where your life is going to be, like for the next 2, 3, 4 years or more. And for me, as I'm sure it is for a lot of the people that would be listening, you gotta have some music in there.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, all of us are passionate about music, whether we'd like to admit it or not. And you need to have it in your life, no matter what you're doing. So I really value that. I'm totally going to change the subject because I want to talk to Sophia about your social media account. You're pretty popular, I'm going to say. And you post on there like every day. I always look at them. They're very honest and very genuine. And I think a lot of accounts that I see that are practice accounts are people just trying to like get their name out there and trying to like flex their skill, but you're really honest about I'm struggling with this, or you show yourself messing up in a video, which is it's really authentic, and it shows that nobody's perfect and you're an amazing musician, and amazing musicians make mistakes. Like I don't know if any of you follow Hillary Hahn on Instagram, but she's making mistakes all the time on her Instagram, and I'm like, I love that because you're like top 10 musician in the world right now, and it makes me feel better when I'm like, well, I can't get that note today. So how has having your social media account for music, and Ben has one too, and Ivan has one, but yes, we can all talk about this, but I guess I just wanted to ask you, like, how has it helped you improve your own like musical growth and just how you've started learning and reflecting as a musician?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you for the kind words. I don't remember why I was like, hey, I should start a practice account. But I did in like 2017. And originally I was like too afraid to show my face because of that stigma that you were talking about, Abby. Like, I can't make mistakes because I need to perform perfectly and people need to see that this is the final product and it's just all sparkly and, and I didn't want people to see the behind the scenes, me crying in the practice room, like my hands hurt today, like stuff like that. But eventually I got over it and was like, you know what? I see too many videos where it's clearly the person practiced those 12 measures for an hour and then took 50 takes to get that video that they posted, and now it's getting all popular. That's not what musician life is. That's not, hey, look at this perfect take I got first try. Like, no, it is the crying in the practice room. It's the, I have calluses, or I've got a cold and I can't play my instrument properly. Like, that is what's going on in our lives. And I felt like people didn't see that enough. And so I wanted to put that out there and just be like, hey, I suck today. Anyone else? Like, just being really real and acknowledging that I go through that and so does everybody else, and it didn't need to be hidden. More directly to your question, though, after that long intro, I think that it has really helped me personally because it has been kind of like a death sentence to my perfectionism. Not completely, it's still there, but just the willingness to acknowledge to myself, hey, this isn't perfect yet, and that's okay. The goal is not to be perfect, it's to be passionate, and I've got that. And so constantly posting, or even like fighting the temptation to post something I've practiced 50 times and say, okay, one take challenge. So I'm just gonna video it and I'm gonna post it, and that's gonna be what it is, because I need people to know that that's how it really is right now with me. So yeah, it has definitely taught me that it's okay to make mistakes. It has been tricky to give myself that grace. I feel like as musicians, we're constantly beating ourselves up over not performing perfectly, and it's stupid, really, because you have to make those mistakes so you can learn. But it's a mentality that we often get trapped in, the I'm not good enough, I can't do it, like I suck, look at all those mistakes. Like, it's just so toxic. And so it's really helped for me to be able to put out my mistakes instead of people expecting a perfect, like, Hillary Hahn performance video. Like, no, this is my bedroom practice at 10:30 and I've got my pajamas on and I stopped in the middle to take a snap. So like, this is my real life, and it's helped with, like, I can be a real human and people don't have to see the perfectly polished, because that actually doesn't exist in my life. So
That's so awesome. I love hearing that. I have a practice account, but I haven't really posted in a few months because I have that. I've all of my professors have been telling me, like, oh, it's so good to record yourself and listen back and you learn from it. That's kind of a big thing now, especially that we have to send everything via recording. But then I hear it while I'm like putting a caption or something, and I'm like, I can't post this. I am playing this note wrong, or I worry about that a lot. But I am impressed that you can be so authentic and you're okay with it. I will hopefully be that strong one day.
yes.
Ben has a practice account too, but he's always playing different instruments on it, and I think it's so cool. And then there's like flute ones, and I'm like, man, I can't even play that. Like, what? Maybe you can talk about some of the challenges of playing multiple instruments. For those who don't know, actually nobody knows except Ben, I was in a chamber group with Ben last semester, and when I saw that I was in a chamber group with him, like, oh my god, like I need to practice. Like, I value your playing so much. It's like, why would they put me with Ben? Like, what? But he would play the clarinet part and the oboe part because we were putting it together as recording, and we did a quartet for flute, clarinet, oboe, and bassoon. And he would just be like, whatever you want me to play, professor, like, I'll just pick it up and I'll just play it, like, whatever you want me to do. And she was always so impressed that you could do that, and so was I. So, I mean, maybe you can talk about, like, what type of challenges you have with playing multiple instruments and maybe just like the basics of going back and forth between them, or even just maybe some of the mental blocks you have with like, this flute embouchure is difficult, or I don't know, something like that. Talk about it.
Yeah. So woodwind doubling in itself is an art as music as just playing one instrument is. And the biggest issue that typically will come up with someone who is playing multiple instruments, whether usually within the same family, like multiple woodwinds, they are all so different that when I'm playing the oboe, I have to have my oboe hat on. I'm not a clarinetist first. I'm not a saxophonist first. I'm an oboist first. Same thing when I'm playing the clarinet or the saxophone or the flute. And this is also similar to other woodwind players who just play flute and piccolo. When you're playing piccolo, you're not a flutist, you're a piccoloist. Piccoloist? Anyways, moving on. But so it's very hard to be like, okay, I'm an oboist, but you could have just played clarinet in orchestra for an hour and you're trying to get in your oboe practice because you have a lesson tomorrow that you're not prepared for. Is this a real story? Find out. So okay, sorry. So sometimes you're like, I was so focused on playing clarinet and how my fingers move on that and how my air column is set up and how my embouchure feels, that when I'm playing oboe, I have to remember that this isn't the clarinet. I can't treat it as such because that's such a common pitfall that will happen with doublers is they're like, oh, I have 2 hours to practice. Okay, let me spend an hour on clarinet, half an hour on oboe, half an hour on flute. But that's not productive practicing. It's more productive to practice an hour on clarinet alone and then just take the next hour off than it is to try and cram 3 instruments into one 2-hour practice session. And I think this also goes for rep with me. I can't practice like an etude, 3 excerpts and a solo piece in one practice session. I need to be like, okay, I'm going to do the etude and these 2 excerpts in this practice, and I'm going to do this last excerpt and the solo piece in my second practice session later tonight. So it comes a lot down to planning your practices, which as a musician, everyone knows is very important to have a goal or an idea of what you're going to do. And that's very much the same when you're trying to practice multiple instruments. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Now I'm like so curious. So basic question, do you take lessons on every, I feel like I'm being stupid. Are you taking lessons on every instrument?
So NYU registered lessons, I'm only taking clarinet and oboe because that's how much my credit space allows me for. However, this summer I have been taking flute lessons. I did take saxophone lessons in high school. There's a saxophone player here. No offense, the saxophone's a lot easier than the other woodwinds, but it's still the same. You need to treat it as the saxophone. You can't say, oh, it's easy, push it off. Like you actually have to give time to it and learn how to play it. So it's important to take lessons. If anyone here is a multiple woodwind performer or is just interested in playing multiple instruments, it's very important to take lessons on your instruments from someone who is a professional on those instruments. Like I could take a lesson with the person who plays Reed 3 at Aladdin, but whether he's a bassoonist first, whether he's a saxophonist first, why would I go to someone who plays multiple instruments and has to kind of dedicate time to it when I can go to someone who has spent their whole life learning how to perfect this one instrument? So, of course, if you are a woodwind doubler, meet other woodwind doublers, take lessons with them if you can. But when you're trying to learn the basics of how to produce a good sound on an instrument, you should always go to the professional who has spent their entire life playing it, not someone who is playing it because the job calls for it, but they also love it.
So last question for you right now. When you go to teach, because you said that you're planning on teaching in the future, will you teach a specific instrument or will you kind of take your own advice, I suppose.
So I'm currently debating whether I want to do like public school, like high school band teaching, or if I want to do a private studio. I mean, of course, I want to do a private studio, but in the private studio, I would focus probably only on clarinet, just because I've had the most amount of training on that, and I always consider clarinet as my primary instrument. Whether like I could be practicing oboe, I have the mentality that I'm an oboe primary, but I know in my soul I'm a clarinet primary, so I would only be teaching on that. But like, let's say someone on Instagram DMs me an oboe question, I can still answer it with the knowledge that I have, but I'm gonna always put the warning of this is coming from someone who hasn't been playing for that long and isn't planning on doing classical oboe professionally.
I mean, you never know. You never know. Oboe is needed. No, but I know what you mean. And I'm like, man, Ben, oh my God, I barely have enough time to practice flute. And here Ben is having to practice like a million instruments. So I'm very impressed by you. That's all I have to say. Ivan, I'm going to switch gears here. And you mentioned that you want to be in a string quartet, or that's something that you might be interested in doing. We had a talk earlier with one of your professors, Professor Torgel, or he works at UCSB and that's where you are. And he talked about, he has a solo career, of course, but he was on an orchestral path and then kind of went into a string quartet. And another professor we talked to yesterday, Professor Jonathan Marshall, also plays in a quartet. And I don't know, I'm not really in the string world, so I don't really know, but I want to ask, like, who has inspired you to be interested in being a string quartet? Is it people at UCSB? Or I know that you're playing in the concert tonight, little shout out, with a quartet from UCSB. So I don't know, did you get your love for it there?
I think that's probably, I feel like just chamber music in general, specifically string quartet, has been like my favorite form of playing, like favorite like outlet for music. Like I love solo works for cello, and like concertos and like the Bach cello suites, but I really like playing and practicing with other people just because it's more enjoyable and more like intimate, I feel. My one of the string quartets that like really like got me interested in doing that was the Dover Quartet, and then recently just listening to the Ataka Quartet and also the Caladori Quartet. But I also just really enjoy the role that the cello plays in like that setting, whereas like it's not so much like as cliche like to say like the hard stuff that the first violin has to play, but like there are moments where like the cello just gets to shine, but it's more like what Professor Marshall yesterday was saying about the viola's role, where it's like supporting but also has moments where it's like the solo part or like the middle part. There's just so much more diversity in the music for the cello in like a chamber setting versus a solo piece. I just feel like it just makes it that much more enjoyable, and that's really why I prefer string quartet over everything.
I'm so jealous that you guys get to have such beautiful music. When I was listening to all of the string professors talk these past 2 days, I'm like, man, like, why don't like, I guess wind quartets do, wind quintets, but I'm still jealous. I was going to say something about, your professor, your private teacher, Professor Kletzel, was talking this morning, and we asked her a question. She's really big about finding your own voice in the music, not your teacher's voice. So kind of developing your own musical sound and finding your own musical path in general. And I asked her the question of, when you're playing in a quartet, how do you maintain your voice while also maintaining one voice with the 4 people that you're playing with? And she was talking kind of about what you were saying, Ivan, that everybody has one voice together, but you make recommendations. You say, hey, she mentioned WC, like in this part, this is what I'm feeling. And maybe can we try this? So I guess getting to work with other people, like I was saying earlier, is a beautiful thing, especially in music. And I've missed it so much. I hope we get back soon. But that's a whole other tangent. I want to go around to everyone now and take as much time as you want to talk about it, because we still have a bunch of time. Maybe talking about what you wish you knew now, based on your experiences as a music major or your involvement in music throughout your life. Like, what advice would you give to your past self? I know it's very broad, but I'm sure that there's something that probably comes to mind that you think of. But yeah, go around and whoever wants to start.
I would probably say, like, practice your skills more. Skills are great. Skills are very important for everything, fundamentals. but I would probably say I wish I would have learned more music theory earlier on. Like, going into school, like, not having much, like, going to college not having much, like, background in music theory made it, like, very difficult to really, like, navigate through everything and know, like, what to focus on in, like, certain pieces, or even, like, just in music theory classes in general, where you would have to, like, write a piece, or you have to do a Roman numeral analysis of, like, a certain passage, and, like, all of that. It would just be a lot easier to delve into music theory earlier on instead of, like, waiting.
I really like that advice. That's really good. I think mine is a little more general. I think it can be applied to a lot of things in life, but I think after a practice session or like a group rehearsal, um, just keeping tabs on what I've done, what I've learned, and then what I want to do at the next point. And that not only would have helped me earlier on when I actually started doing that, but also kind of kept me from thinking about it later. Really helping you, like, divide your time and understand, like, you need to take a break from a lot of things, especially when they can get stressful, especially when you have a lot of pressure on yourself externally or internally. Just helps so much to know, like, what I did today is enough, and what I'm going to do tomorrow is going to help way more. And that's honestly probably the most valuable thing that I've learned from doing so many years in music.
I'm gonna tag on a little bit of that because I had two pieces of advice. The first thing being, don't be afraid to take breaks. We all need breaks at the end of the semester after 12 to 15 weeks of probably almost daily practice. You need to just not be in the same room as your instrument or instruments. Like, and of course, you're the only one who knows how long of a break you need. I think about a month ago took a lesson with the principal E flat clarinet of Chicago Symphony. He said that the first flutist after their concert cycle, they take a month off, like, and they spend it in like a cabin in the woods. So I think knowing knowing when to take breaks is just as important as acknowledging how much work you have done. And then the second piece of advice is be transparent with your lesson teacher or teachers. If you struggled this week because you really just couldn't get like a good tone, and you like or like had a very self-deprecating week with your practice, tell them that, so that they can change their plans for the lesson to be, okay, let's tackle the tone issues, let's figure out what's going on, instead of saying, hey, I learned all this entire Rode Caprice, the entire first movement of a Beethoven symphony, and I don't know, the third movement of a concerto, like, and not mentioning that you were struggling with your tone this week, you're not going to get out of the lesson what you need to get out of the lesson. So when you tell your professor, like, my fingers this week just weren't moving, I don't know what's up, or I couldn't get a good tone, they can change their plans to help figure out how they can use the rep that you learned to help better what you were having an issue on, and instead of just the regular growth that would normally happen.
I want to chime in before Sophia goes. And I had some rough, even exactly what Ben said, but even if it's not a physical like music thing, but it's a personal thing, if you're struggling personally during the week, you tell your professor that, you tell your private teacher, and like they're going to understand. And if you had a rough week, you're not going to get out of the lesson what you want to either. And just like being transparent, I like personally dealt with that this last semester of going through like personal things and talking to my private teacher. You have like such a close relationship with them, or at least you should. And they really should care about your well-being and understanding like, all right, well, let's go a little bit easier this lesson. So next week, maybe you can not make up for last time. Yes, Sue Kyung, that is my private teacher, and she's a sweetheart and cares about all of her students so much. But yeah, that's my 2 cents, is not only physically with your playing, but also emotionally with how you're doing. Yes, take breaks. Okay, Sophia, you can go ahead.
That was a perfect, like, this is all just flowing so nicely, because that was one thing I was thinking about even from when I read the prompt yesterday or whenever it was in the email. I wish I had known that it was okay to take breaks before like COVID, when we were all kind of forced to take a break in one way or another. Like I said, I am kind of a perfectionist, and I think all musicians have to be to some degree. It's just part of the job description, but there's a level when it's too much, and I was very, very much focused on the streak. And to be honest, my practice account didn't help very much with that, because I've done 100 days of practice like 3 times. I've done I have to post this same clip every day to see how it improves, all of that sort of thing. And I was more obsessed with the idea of keeping up my streak of practicing than taking care of my mental health and actually making progress on the music. And then one day, one of my teachers, I have 2. I have a private teacher that I took lessons with in high school, and then I have my professor at school, and I kind of alternate when school isn't in session. So one of my teachers said to me, it's possible to over practice, right? And at the time I was preparing for another competition, and I had peaked with the piece that I was playing, and then the more I practiced, the worse it got. And I was like, what the heck is happening? I'm practicing so hard. Like, I put in hours on this, and it was so great, and now it's sucking. And she was like, you're practicing too much. Just like, I challenge you, don't touch this concerto for a week. And I was like, no. And I was so scared, but I didn't practice the concerto for a week. And when I came back to it, it had like skyrocketed, and it was even better than where I had left it when I thought I had peaked with it. So acknowledging that it is very possible to over practice and that you will have this moment in time when if you practice anymore without a break, it will get worse. There's a point of, what's the phrase? Like diminishing return. There we go. There's a point of diminishing return when it's like practicing more, but you're actually getting worse. So recognize that that's a reality. And just like Ben was saying and Abby added, like, take a break when you need to, whether it is just a day, like, I'm gonna skip practicing that specific piece, or whether it is 2 weeks of not practicing on your instrument. Like, you can do mental practice, you could do some music theory, you could just listen to music, or maybe it's I can't see my instrument for 2 weeks. like everyone has said before, like, what you need and how you can benefit from the break, and not just shut out everything and not involve music in your life, because that's kind of impossible and not good for you either. But just stepping back and choosing to relax a little bit and it'll be okay, and you'll probably come back to it refreshed and more excited about music and even playing better than you did when you took the break. So that's something that I've really learned over COVID, because I felt so guilty about like, well, I'm not really motivated to practice today, and but I should, and like, no, you don't need to. There is no should. Like, if you're not motivated, if you're not making progress, take a break. You will thank yourself, and so will your peers.
Yeah. Well, you know when you've won, when your private teacher is telling you that you're practicing too much. Yeah, that's kind of insane. But yeah, the last thing you said about like taking breaks, I don't remember what I was going to say. But I guess I want to go on and talk about, I know this is like a common question we get asked all the time. It's like, what's your most memorable music experience? But I like actually want you to talk about it and talk about how it like changed the way that you perceived music. Like I can totally remember mine, and it was probably when I was playing in a rehearsal in CVYO, and I was playing Rimsky-Korsakov, and it is the most beautiful flute solo I've ever heard in my entire life, but you can't take a breath at all. And somehow I managed to do it, and everyone was like applauding, like the orchestra, when I had finished playing this solo, like in the middle of rehearsal, like people just stopped playing and like applauded me. And that was like the best feeling I had ever felt in my entire life, is that like I worked hard and I received this return of like approval and satisfaction from my peers, and I felt like I had finally become a part of something, and it was just super special. So I want to hear that moment for you and how it changed your perspective on your musicality or your artistry in general. Anyone can go. I know you probably have to think about it for a bit because that's kind of a big question, but
I can hop in with mine. So my probably like favorite memory of music. So what year was it? I think it was after my senior year, before my freshman year at NYU. I did the honors performance series at the Sydney Opera House, and little did I know until I got there that I was actually principal B flat of the band, and I had to play. Like I knew I was on the first clarinets, I just didn't know if I was principal or not, and I had to play the Blue Shades clarinet solo in the Sydney Opera House. I so of course, like the whole week leading up to it, everyone in the band's like, "You sound so good." And in the part, which I actually have it behind me, it says solo, standing, facing audience, preferably in front, near conductor. So you play memorize basically. So it was a great way to end my like high school musical journey and close off that chapter, because the adrenaline of the concert. We played like a Bach chorale arranged for band. We played Holst First Suite, which was the first band piece I ever played at a high level, and then Blue Shades, and like the adrenaline of the concert were the last group. I did the solo. I didn't do it perfectly. I didn't need to do it perfectly. I just needed to sound good enough. And the conductor tells me to, after the piece, come back standing next to the podium, just stand there and bow. And everyone in the main hall of Sydney Opera House stood up and was giving me a standing ovation. And of course, we love self-gratification and gratification from others, but there's nothing more surreal than having that be the closing chapter of your high school musical journey and on to hopefully even better in college, which, spoiler alert, it was better. So
that piece is so good. I'm so that, and like the clarinet solo, I'm very happy for you.
I think probably for me, also I was playing. Oh, am I back? Okay. I was talking about the New Orleans trip that we went in high school during my last year of high school, and the competition that we were playing at in orchestra was playing Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Talley, and specifically the part where the orchestra breaks up into a string quartet and then two separate orchestras. Uh, just that moment, like playing that piece was like it was just like amazing. It was just like a great feeling to just like have all of our work finally pay off. And yeah, it's so great. Um, and I don't even know. It was just I was gonna say something about it. I literally forgot what I was gonna say. But after that, it was just like crazy. And then also on the same trip, it's like a kind of a funny story because we went to the concert. It was the University of Lafayette, I think, that was like playing. I don't remember what university it was. Abby, if you remember, interject. But like the concert that we went to, where it was like the full orchestra playing. Then afterwards, yeah, Tulane. I think it was Tulane. But we got to our cello section got to hang out with the cellists that were in that college orchestra at the time, and we did like a mini studio class. This was when we were like late for the bus and everyone was waiting for us. Yeah, because it was like just us, and then we like they were like waiting for us on the bus. We had to like sprint, but like I got to play for them. They were just like giving feedback, and it was just like crazy because that was like a precursor to like going into college, and that kind of also influenced what I wanted to do. So yeah, that was just overall, that trip was just great.
I'll jump in. Any trip has been amazing. Always go on the trip, guys. If you can make it work, go on the trip. That's why I liked being in the marching band. Even if you music majors out there aren't planning on it, maybe take that opportunity. You'll do great in it. You'll have a great time, and you'll go on a trip. Don't get that opportunity as just any standard normal, you know, undergrad. You gotta take the opportunity that's presented to you. Get a full free trip. That's awesome. Um, Also, for me, if I'm gonna be specific towards like, college, university, being at a rivalry game at an away stadium where they are packed, like full to the brim, and I get on the field, the first thing we do is like jump up and down and scream a lot to like start our pregame fight song show, and the entire stadium is booing with their entire full throat and body. That's the most invigorating, inspiring thing that you can ever get. Almost as good as the applause, maybe a little bit better. It depends on how you take it. But after that, and you do like a big old run onto the field, sprint over there, and then you just take in as big a breath as you can and blow out the most, uh, the nastiest, blattiest tone you can imagine, which is a trombone player's dream, of course, but it really feels good to have a feeling of being part of something bigger, even if the people that are also part of it are opposed to you. You're still part of something, and that was a really transformative experience. I always keep thinking about that time whenever I was feeling like, I don't think I can do it this year. Maybe it's time for me to move on. That was the point that I kept coming back to. I was like, oh, I got to keep doing it. I gotta have more of those moments.
I know what you mean, James, with the like just being a part of something, and that feeling, especially with music, is so powerful. And I know I talked a little in my intro about that, but that kind of encompasses my favorite musical memory. If like, it sounds so shallow to say it that way, but you know what I mean. And it was a performance with CVYO. Every semester there was one moment in particular when I felt really connected to the whole orchestra, like at least one. So there are 8 that I could talk about. But the one that I remember most specifically was when we played Danzon Number 2 by Arturo Marquez. And it maybe was it that flute that you did? I can't remember now, Abby. But either way, it's a fantastic piece, and I'm sure you've all heard it, but you should listen to it again. And it's just so, you have to be dancing. If you're not dancing while you're playing it, you're doing it wrong, because it's so infectious and yes, so romantic that you have to be physically involved with it. And there were some kids who were not, and you could tell because the sound that was coming out of them was not quite as passionate, not quite as intense. You know, it just wasn't quite on the same level. But there were a couple other people in the performance that were like full on dancing while they were doing it. And I was like, you know what? It was in this one of the middle sections that goes dun 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 da 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 dun, and I see I'm getting excited just singing it. So within that, and the violins were all playing double stops. So for non-strings, that is when you play 2 notes at a time. So your bow is on 2 different strings. You can even do 3. Usually it's 2. And I knew that if I got really invested, I was going to hit more than those 2 strings. And the perfectionism in me was like, don't do it. You're going for the pristine sound. Don't do it. But I was like, screw you. And I went for it, and I got invested, and I just poured my heart into this middle section. And I hit many wrong notes, and I got some awful sounds, and all the cats in the neighborhood of the Performing Arts Plaza probably died. But it was so like, I was one. It sounds weird and spiritual, but everybody who was really invested was united in that moment. And the power that I felt and the like pure joy of playing specifically that section, but entirely that piece, was just on a different level than anything else I've performed in that way. And I wanted that in every single piece after that. And I tried to find places where, like, you know what? My perfectionism can go out the window. It's more about the passion. And it's so fruitful when you do that, and you will never regret it. So always go for the passion over the.
I think the piece you're playing has a lot to do with that too, because I felt that in that piece 100% from beginning to end. That piece is just the most Italian, like romantic piece I've ever heard in my entire life, and you just can't help but like hear it in your head and sing along to it. And I felt that we did Brahms 1, 2, we did the last movement, and there's just this long like tonal like D that the bass holds, that like the trombones and tuba, like everybody holds this like long D, while the like all the strings are kind of like doing their own frilly things over it. I don't even know. But just something about that, like I just have to fixate on it. Like it's just so beautiful. And I love how all of our stories were about being with other people. And music is really about that. It's, you know, I personally struggle with sitting in a practice room by myself for 3 hours, 4 hours straight. Without a connection. Even like a recording will help me feel more tied down to other people. And I rely on playing in orchestras and playing in duets and quartets and even in small groups, like to feel that love for music. I'm sure you guys might feel similarly. Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing those very personal experiences and for being here today. This hour kind of like flew by for me, and it was so awesome for you all to be here, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. We will be putting this recording on our YouTube in a week, in case you want to send it out to anyone. Yeah, we have, I know Sophia, you have a rehearsal tonight for your festival. I don't know a lot about it, but good luck on that. If anyone else wants to tune in, we have performances tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific, so in an hour. If you want to tune in, it's on our YouTube. Here, maybe I can send it. Or you can share it with anyone else. We have a couple people from NYU performing. We have Ivan's quartet. We have somebody from Berkeley. She's playing electric violin. Should be super fun. And then we have an hour-long jazz session. Oh, and we have a sax trio, I think. And Ivan's gonna solo on Bach. So Ivan just left, he's too embarrassed. So tune in if you want, share it with anyone you want. And thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope I can.
Yeah, thanks for setting this up.
Yeah. Everyone have a good night.
Right back at you. See ya.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.